Um, well, hi everyone. I'm Katie Alexander, and I'm one of the co-authors of Unstuck. I'm also an occupational therapist. That's my field, and got to meet our amazing co-author team when I was the program director of the Model Asperger program at Ivy Mount School in the DC area. But now I'm in the San Diego area, so that's where I am zooming from today. Monica, did you want to give a little intro?
I'm Monica Werner, and I am still in Maryland. I was working with Katie when she was the program director, and when she moved to San Diego, I became the program director at the Ivy Mount School. I am by background, so like Katie, special education is our background, and we also have, I am a licensed professional counselor.
Excellent. And today our focus is around troubleshooting, especially with students who are struggling. But to start, we wanted to open our coaching sessions with any celebrations. So anything that has gone really well for you recently, student successes, your own successes, if anyone wants to share any of that.
I'll share. I had a student who this has been a struggle with. He's got autism and has a lot of acting out behaviors. He's also gifted. And the whole year has been a struggle. And it's sometimes I feel like I'm teaching and taking the class and he's just in the room because he hasn't been that interested in this. But I just sort of keep at it and keep using the goal plan, why do check every single time as I'm talking to him. And yesterday he got suspended for hitting me, but for the rest of the day. But today I said, tomorrow's going to be a new day. We troubleshot the class that he's been leaving from basically, because he doesn't like it. And we I wrote down what we'd done before, said that plan didn't work. Let's make a new plan. And he made it through that class today. So for the first time all year. So that was great.
That's incredible.
That is wonderful. Good.
I had something to share, and sorry, I have my camera off because I have yet to eat lunch today. So I'm hoping that might happen while I'm here at the coaching session. And I actually haven't gotten to implement anything yet. I'm still in kind of the training module mode, but I have a student who's kind of my poster child for wanting to implement this. And he had his IEP meeting today and presented himself. We're attempting to do student-led IEPs with all of our kiddos and just did a really great job. And we really got to celebrate a bunch of his successes, such as kind of navigating. I'm in a middle school, and so kind of navigating multiple classes and, kind of working on some of those cognitive flexibility skills. And I actually wrote a goal for him kind of in that area. And so it was really nice to have an in-person meeting where he kind of really got to shine.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
And Jessica, it sounds really important how student-centered you are, because that's a core value of Unstuck.
I agree. Would anyone else? Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you. Yeah, we're not perfect at it, but we're trying.
Like 10 minutes before this group, I did this. Oh, it's fuzzy. This one, the feelings target and have the kids put in the group, put the feelings on, like label what number it was. And I was just surprised how like engaged they were. These kids, like they come similar to the person who shared before, like it feels like they're just kind of there while I'm doing the lesson, but they were like really into it. And one of them's like, I would put that at a 2, and the other kid's like, no, I think that's a 4. And we talked about how different people have different numbers, and that's totally fine. And it was just like, it was exciting to see them actually like participate. So
nice.
That is exciting. Thank you. Any other celebrations?
So Stephanie, my thought is about what you just shared is it's about the power. So much of Unstuck is about the power of just letting language and ideas wash over children without always being directive with them. Just giving them access to a vocabulary that promotes collaborative problem solving and that they don't engage with necessarily immediately, and then giving them a voice when they're ready for it. And I love that what you said is so important, that you can, a 2 and a 4 for the same emotion for different people is an important thing for children to learn also.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. All right. You good, Katie?
I think so. Okay, next slide. So we also wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions, and we can discuss general questions that you might have about the curriculum, or if you already had a student situation in mind that you wanted to, bring to us to consider as a group. We would love to hear those now. And of course, as we move along, please do also ask questions along the way. But did anybody have any questions they wanted to share now? Okay. All right. So we're going to start with one student example, and this kind of difficulty that we're going to discuss, Monica and I have both heard about from teachers. We've experienced it when working with students ourselves. And it's when a student just isn't buying into flexibility. Like they're just like, what do you mean flexible? I'm not sure this is going to help me. This doesn't sound like a great idea. So what are creative ways to invite buy-in? Next slide. Thank you. So Diego, he's a 4th grade student on the autism spectrum. He's quiet during lessons, rarely participates, actively rejects being flexible and talks about it openly, but also demonstrates difficulty with flexibility. So changes to his routine can quickly upset him, like a 5 of frustration. And he has difficulty shifting from topic to topic with his friends and classmates. He is also really kind and generous, musical, and a really bright student. Next slide. So whenever I'm working with a student and this kind of difficulty comes up, my first questions are, okay, so for Diego, how does inflexibility work for him right now? What purpose is it serving? And what about flexibility is not clicking? Next slide. And I'm always brought back to this quote from Ari Naaman, who at the time was the president and co-founder of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. And when we first, so all along the way, Unstuck and On Target in its development, we have co-developed the curriculum with autistic self-advocates, teachers, parents, students. And when he reviewed the curriculum, one of the questions he asked us was, well, what purpose does inflexibility serve? For one thing, it is an effective anti-anxiety coping mechanism. It provides order in the context of a world that is confusing and illogical for us. Next slide. In a minefield, and he likens it to a minefield, and then he says, in a minefield, we would be very cautious and resistant to making any sudden, unplanned moves, adding, this is similar to what it's like in social situations for those of us with autism. And so as a team, we like to think about what kind of accommodations can support inflexibility. So inflexibility is adaptive, and it can limit these unexpected and overloading events. Overload is dangerous. And for those of you who are with us in the first or in the January sessions, you probably heard some of this. And we can revisit that if folks would like. We included some of those slides at the end. It leads to anxiety, impulsivity, inappropriate behavior. Overload creates profound risk in context of social isolation, teasing, and bullying. And in a minefield, it is wise to use caution. So we can respect routines that don't interfere with participation in the school setting. We can respect those deep data sets that our kids often have, that like deep knowledge they have about different content areas and their expertise in areas of interest, and give them time when they can talk about those things or draw them, whatever, whatever works for those students. Respect their persistence, because sometimes what we see in inflexibility is this flip side of persisting with even complex problems or demanding tasks, and we can respect those times too, and their reliability. So those are all accommodations that we can be thinking about. Next slide. And this still for all of the authors, and whenever I present, this quote really resonates with folks. And so this middle school student says to us, autism is like a vice on your brain, and each unexpected event is like another turn on the vice. It just keeps building until you feel like you're going to explode. Sometimes when you explode, it comes out the wrong way. And so I don't know, for those of you with us today, does that sound familiar to like any of the students that you've worked with? Can you imagine them feeling that way too? Yeah.
I mean, definitely.
Yeah, so the first step, so when I'm working with a student who just is rejecting the idea of getting flexible about anything, the first place I want to start is, have we created a setting where it's safe to be flexible, and where we're creating more of that just right challenge for learning flexibility, rather than a situation where a student is using flexibility just to survive. Next slide. So for Diego, we actually use some more videos to support him, but you could also use books. I've worked with students who love comic books, like anything that works with the student's interests that helps illustrate flexibility. And this would be happening like alongside some of those accommodations. Narrate the value of being flexible. So with yourself, so just saying, like, oh, I had to be flexible today, and then saying why it was good. And because I was flexible, I got through my morning routine more quickly, and then I had time to stop at Starbucks, which was really great. I'm so glad I was flexible. So really trying to create those connections between flexibility and good things. Then also narrating that for other students, and just creating as much of a social life of the value of flexibility as is possible. And then also praising the students. So even if it's noticing the time, even like a little bit of flexibility, and you could say, Diego, I just noticed something. And this, with students, depending on the student, I might even say like, Diego, can I share with you something I noticed? And usually they'll be like, yes. And then I'll say like, I noticed that when this happened, you were really flexible and you used your plan B, and you were able to start even more quickly, and you had more time at recess. So flexibility helped you get more time at recess, and that's pretty great. So making all of those connections as you can, using that growth mindset that we can grow flexibility, and flexibility can get stronger and better with practice and all those little opportunities, and really trying to make sure we're hitting that 4-to-1 praise to correction ratio, because sometimes when students feel like they're constantly kind of bumping into difficulty or bumping into what they experience as failure, they can start to withdraw a little, and there again, being flexible just feels harder to even think about. So using that 4-to-1 praise to correction ratio can help turn that around and create a more positive climate for the student. Any questions about those? Okay, next slide.
I just quickly say there was a question in the chat whether
thank you.
the PowerPoint will be available afterward to folks.
And how will folks access that?
I'll drop it in the chat at the end.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
So
Yeah.
So I'd like to actually pick up from Katie here and say what I often say about flexibility is I think Katie is so true. We have to create safe environments for people to be flexible, but we also have to remember that flexibility is often the F word for our kids because it's been used in this really aggressive way. Often, I need you to be flexible right now. And what that really means is I want you to do what I'm telling you to do right now. And there is a very remote chance that at some point we will come back and revisit this on your terms, right? So it's not a word that has been paired in a lot of ways with good feelings and problem solving. We as adults, because we, especially with ADHD and on the autism spectrum, we tend to characterize kids as rigid, and therefore the desirable goal on the other side is flexible. And whenever they're not doing it, we call them out on it. So I just want to sort of put that in there because I find that I have to really think carefully about making sure I catch how flexible our children in fact are. And that's what Katie was highlighting, that there's so many times where our kids are just being flexible in the course of a daily classroom navigation, right? Their pencil breaks and they have to sharpen the tip, sharpen it. They're being flexible, right? So there's lots of opportunities to catch big and small opportunities for flexibility. I'm a big fan of using videos. And so I've been kind of, harping on this in some of these. And I think this is my last parent coaching, so you won't have to listen to this again. We have a YouTube channel. This is the home screen. It's got great parent resources, but it also has a series of videos organized by the vocabulary script that you're trying to teach. Plan A, Plan B, and you can go in and look at the list. And then Gary, and what I've done is a lot YouTube. I'm old. I don't really understand how YouTube works, but they don't let you link, especially if it's for children, every video. So what I do is I copy the link and I put it in the description. And these videos are really fun for the kids, and they have the advantage of being outside and away from them. Nothing to do with them. We can all laugh at Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. We can all laugh at the Pink Panthers, SpongeBob, right? And they're often modeling really powerful things that are very engaging to our children. So next slide. Also, I created during the pandemic, I had to deliver Unstuck online. So Katie, actually, Alexander and I both created these Nearpod lessons. And what's fun about them for you, Katie and I are both very respectful of how many demands you have on your time. This is a screenshot of a video that we've used in one of the Nearpod lessons. And what's fun is it has these pauses. Nearpod has these, every blue dot is a pause and a question gets asked. So it scaffolds you too, as a teacher, what you might want to point out right there. So if you're having a rough day and you need to talk about the feelings target, you have a turnkey way of talking about it where we ask the questions for you, right? And the kids answer them, and you actually have to decide. It actually will tell you if you got the right answer or the wrong answer. Many of the students I have would debate with me about the correctness of what I thought was the right answer. I have no problem as long as they're engaged and listening. But they love the videos, and it's just an easy way for you to go, once again, and access resources that engage the kids, put them out, and reduce burden on you. All right, next. And then this is a really wonderful analogy that Katie came up with that I really love. But and you guys actually referred to it early on, which is, you're delivering Unstuck and you're feeling like I'm not really getting any traction here. And, sometimes the kids are having fun with an activity and sometimes they're like, and when we're doing that, when Katie and I are delivering the intervention and we're seeing that, we're like, okay, really? we had 5 people and 10 master special educators coming in, and we can't come up with an activity that they don't yawn at. But what's really important about Unstuck, I think, is that you just keep the exposures, you keep using the language, and you think it's not working and you think nothing's happening. And the next slide. And it's a little bit like when you're trying to make caramel or roux, you're kind of stirring and stirring and stirring, and then suddenly it clicks in. I don't know. I would love to do, like, I'm not a hardcore researcher. I would love to know what the click in factor is. But I can see it click in, and you know it's starting to click in. At some point, the kid will be really angry at you, and they'll say, you know what? You need a plan B. And I, at that moment, having had that said to me many times, I always stop and I say, am I stuck? And I evaluate, because on more than one occasion, guys, I was the one who was stuck. Was making a demand of the student that they actually really didn't need to comply with, right? Maybe it was something unnecessary. Maybe I was stuck because I wasn't noticing what they were telling me. Like, the room is really loud right now, right? And I'm like, no, it's not, it's fine. Wait a minute, I don't have autistic ears, right? So I think that's when you really know it's working, but it can take a while. It can look like you're stirring and stirring and stirring, and you're starting to worry, is this going to burn? Is this ever going to happen? And then you start noticing it starts to crystallize.
Yeah. And I think, and one of the reasons why it reminds me of like making caramel or like a Cajun roux, which I've yet to do successfully, like one day, but, and I don't get to try that often because I don't have that much extra time. But when I do, and this is happening, there's like a very special kind of anxiety that comes with it. Like, it is a very specific kind of anxiety. And it comes with, like, in my head, the thought train that comes along is like wait, did I mess it up? Is it too late? Did I miss it? Did I, like, and then I've learned to just kind of breathe, like take a deep breath, like check in with the strategy, and then keep going. And inevitably, and so far across all these years of implementing Unstuck, like, it'll come together, and then there it is. And sometimes it comes out as like something a student said. One time it was even a student who like literally looked up at me and he was like, I mean, we were like 6 weeks into intervention, and he looks at me and goes, so I think I'm figuring out that being flexible can be pretty good. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's exactly right. But, you know, it just took time, and then there it was.
Yeah.
So
next slide. So I think this is a list that that we've built over the years of like places where you kind of, when I'm stuck and I'm trying to figure out why Unstuck isn't sticking, isn't really working in a certain situation, I actually will go back and just sort of look to make sure that that I'm in the right place with Unstuck. And I don't, I'm still going to make a goal and do a GWPDC with the kid. I'm still going to think about, is this a compromise situation? All those things. But you might want to think, do you have a common goal with the child? Or are you imposing your goal onto the child? Is the child able to self-regulate, so that have we practiced coping strategies so that when all hell breaks loose, they actually know how to use the coping strategy? This is something we talked about last time, integrating breathing, which is really the best coping strategy out there for many, many people. That combined with taking a walk. Integrating at the beginning of a lesson, just so that it's happening every day before math. Take a deep breath. You're practicing it so that once again, you have it available when the child really needs it. When we're doing the GWPDC, and maybe you figured out a common goal, are you thinking about the student's motivation for doing the goal? Once again, we often tend to be thinking about our motivation. Well, we're doing these math problems because that's what the lesson plan is, and this is how you're gonna master the problems. Well, I don't hear any motivation in there for the student, right? Because I said so, or because I have to. These are not going to work for our guys. So we're really gonna have to think deeply about the student's motivation. And sometimes that does require an external motivator for something that they're really struggling with. It needs to be a little more tangible. And it might be, you're going to work on this math problem for 5 minutes, and then you can go over and read in the book corner for 5 minutes. But if that gets you 10 minutes of quiet, constructive math time, that's often a win for some of our students, right? But we have to think about their motivators. I also think it's also important to remember what you're reinforcing just from a basic behavioral perspective. Are you giving them an awful lot of attention when they're stuck and very little attention when they're being flexible? That's really important because a lot of our kids, because they're so overwhelmed and in this minefield, they're looking for guides through the minefield, right? So that attention is really important to them. So we have to really attend to them, not just in difficult moments. This is, are you being flexible? I mentioned this before. Often the adults are the most rigid people in the room. Are we celebrating incremental success? We often tend to forget that a base hit is really unbelievably awesome, right? Because we were hoping for a grand slam to win the World Series, right? But that's not what we're looking for here. For our kids, sometimes doing 2 or 3 math problems in a row and then checking in is a real victory. And we want to acknowledge that as such. Eventually, we want them to be able to do the worksheet or whatever it is, work independently for a longer period of time. But we want to really think about celebrating incremental successes. And then when they get that success, wow, you did 3 problems all by yourself, right? Are we metacognitively labeling it as a success and saying, hey, remember when you did those 3 problems by yourself? That's a bank that they can do it. Remember in Katie's example, when you were flexible, when you were really struggling on the playground with what you want, the rules for a game, I wonder if we can think about how you made that work then. That kind of well of success reminds kids that they're capable and they can do things. And then really, I think what's really important is, are you using Unstuck not just trotting it out when things are really bad? You want to be using it when, wow, that was a plan B. You're so, can you help me compromise, right? Anything like that is really important. And then have you built up your credibility? And this is really, I think, important for us as really busy people who are not just living only in this child's world, which is, if we tell a child we're going to do something, we have to do it. It's one of the harsh realities of being a teacher. And I think we all know this, but and I will always under promise and over deliver whenever possible. But the idea that we would say to a child, well, I'll talk to you about this later. And then later comes, which is actually a really bad plan with our guys. Our plan needs to be, we can talk about this at 3 o'clock. And that's concrete. But when 3 o'clock comes, short of nuclear holocaust, you better be talking to them about that thing, right? Because it's really important that our kids trust that when we make a plan B, when we make a plan, that we're going to follow through on that plan for them. So those are the big pitfalls that I think about. And then some tips that I have in the next slide is just really remember, when in doubt, write things down. I can't tell you how important this is. Start with small problems. Do not start on the biggest problem. The big problems are tempting to jump right into, but you get all this wonderful success if you start with little things, and it's reinforcing to you and to the child. I've said a million times, please do this when things aren't horrible. And then you might want to, if you have a kid that you find yourself saying often, like, he just can't wait, or she just has to stop, right? And you hear yourself saying that, and I hear you. You might want to use that frustration that you're having to signal to yourself that maybe you need to make a plan for how you're going to wait, because clearly this child is struggling with waiting. And I have to say, at Ivy Mount, and I inherited this from Katie, and I think it's one of the geniuses that I inherited, which is we used to have waiting strategies. What's your waiting strategy? And children had plans for what to do when they had to wait. And waiting strategies were not, let's do your most favorite thing in the world that you can't stop. The key of a waiting strategy is it was short and it was stoppable, right? And then we would make plans with children what to do when the teacher says 1 minute and they would have to wait, right? And often the teacher would hand them their waiting strategy plan at the beginning. Just has to stop. Our children may not know how to stop. It's inhibition, it's an executive function. It actually stopping requires a lot. It requires you to shift your attention. It's actually very executive intensive. And plus, I'm guessing when they're having trouble stopping, it's not because they're having trouble stopping something they really love to go to something they really hate to go to something they really love. It's generally they're having trouble stopping something they really love to go to something they don't like. So we need to teach them how to do that.
Can you give an example of a waiting strategy?
Oh my goodness, yes. Katie, you'll be able to come up with a lot of them. I had a lot of kids that we had a couple of panels of Calvin and Hobbes that they would read, their favorite panels of Calvin and Hobbes. Some children who liked dinosaurs, they would make lists in their heads of their favorite dinosaurs. Some kids, they would count the ceiling tiles. I'm not kidding. Other children would sing their favorite song in their head to themselves twice and then check back in with the teacher. It's always, a waiting strategy is generally very child specific in that you want it to be something that they're going to find somewhat engaging in a short-term way. And some children even had like a little box of waiting strategies. So it was just a shoebox where they might have some Calvin and Hobbes things, where they might have a fidget or a Rubik's Cube, whatever sort of things that they would find sort of, you know, would tide them over, right?
Yeah. And especially things like when we would have a copy of like a comic strip rather than like the whole book, it became like, it stopped itself in some ways. Like it wasn't like endless books. You didn't have to deal with like, oh, I just want to get to the end of this chapter, because we had it kind of timed out, so to speak, with the length of what they had. And especially for students on the autism spectrum, it's very common that reading the same thing over and over again is really actually quite soothing. And some autistic adults even describe it as a type of STEM that, you know, so you don't have to worry so much about having like an endless supply of varied comics. It is okay for a lot of students. You can just have the same thing. And for some students, they might even want to like read the lyrics of a favorite song, read like a part of a transcript from a favorite show. I mean, there are a lot of like, I think especially strategies that tap into a student's area of special interest, you kind of can do two things at once, and that they have a waiting strategy, but they also have something that helps them self-regulate a little bit. And that's like the sweet spot, if you can get a waiting strategy like that.
Right. And then you're going to want to prompt them, do you have your waiting strategy times where you think they may need it? So when they have to wait in line at the cafeteria, when they're going on a school field trip, I mean, it's just one of my fondest memories is thinking about the prep for the field trip. The last thing teachers would say on the way to the, everybody have their waiting strategy, right? Because there were bus rides and all sorts of times to wait. So,
and Monica, I was going to add, sometimes for some students, we would even do like a full goal-wide plan, do check around waiting strategies too.
Yeah.
And you can even, for some students, you could even treat it a little bit like the feelings experiment that we have, but instead of a feelings experiment, it's a waiting strategy experiment. So you could approach it that way to see what works best for that kiddo.
All right. And next, Gary, I think. Yeah, so these are just the links. He's put them, Gary has really generously put them in the chat, and Unstuck and On Target in general, we're actually revising the website now, which is very exciting. But if you just poke around long enough and understand that it was just little old us building the website, all these resources are there for you. And if you have any questions, you can call Tennyson or Chelsea, or they'll reach out to me and Katie, and we'll tell you what page we buried it on. So we wanted to leave some time now for you guys to, ask questions, any concerns you have about the curriculum. I think the other plug, I should by next week have up on the website the Unstuck in a Box, which is my version of trying to make all the printables and the materials for Unstuck easier for teachers. So you just laminate everything at once and you print everything at once. So, and then you just put it into, we love file folders, right? We just stick them all into file folders. And then every single time for the rest of your life, when you deliver the intervention, all your materials are there. So it's a one-time upfront cost, streamlined as much as possible. And so we'll have that on the website too for you. All right, any other questions or concerns that we can help you as you're implementing or starting to implement Unstuck?
I don't know if this is like a thing that you can help with, but like, for me, because it's all new, like a whole new curriculum, I'm finding like, I just don't have a whole lot of time to like sit down and read and prepare. And like when you just showed all the videos, I'm like, oh, that would have been perfect to use with my group today. So it's like, I feel like I'm like just kind of scratching the surface. Like I'm not really knowing what I'm doing. And I'm kind of forging ahead because I haven't really, I don't know, spent a lot of time learning it. So like, do you have any strategies or things to make it quicker?
So, Stephanie, you're going to be really glad to know that we spent the better part of an author meeting recently trying to figure out what the right phrase was to tell you you can't mess up Unstuck. So no matter how you do it, I don't even remember, I actually at least got the profanity out of it. The bottom line, what we have found over and over again is that you do not need to get it perfect. You do not need to implement the lessons exactly the way stated. It seems that there is, we don't know what it is, but there is a lot of room for variability in delivery of the intervention. If you actually look at the Nearpod lessons that I delivered, I shortened it down to 12 weeks. I combined concepts. I totally had to blow up activities because you couldn't do them online, right? And it was still sticking. Mm-hmm. So I would really just be gentle to yourself. I can't tell this enough to teachers right now. In general, I mean, this is always Katie's and mine. We were always wanted to be gentle with teachers, but be gentle with yourself, especially right now. You're not going to mess it up. If you want to go back, if you want to spend 2 weeks on the feelings target because you got so much traction and you love the video, go ahead and show the video the next time. And if you don't want to and you want to skip over, we have a teacher that it turns out, I actually just did an interview with them. He started the entire curriculum with the feelings target. And he now starts every morning in the hallway corralling his kids with the feelings target, right? I don't think he's done, and he's just started using plan A, plan B. You know what it means. You know what plan A, plan B means. Go ahead. Just make sure they're hearing it and that it's positive, right? So
that sure does take a lot of pressure off because I'm like, I'm not doing it right.
No, you're doing it right. Yeah. You're doing it right. Skim the lesson. And this has always been, and you think you guys have it easy. You should see what the middle school and high school curricula look like. Like keeping them down to 7 or 8 pages a lesson is like, a big deal. And what I think is really important to communicate to people that don't have a ton of time for prep. That's why I'm trying to get Unstuck in a Box together for you guys. Because I kind of forgot that part of the educational environment, like how much time you have to print and go to the printer and then get the laminator and then, right, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. What it's really okay You'll skim the lesson quickly, take a look at it. You guys will do the best you can. And if it doesn't work, that lesson, you may read the lesson a little more carefully to see like what went off the rails. You might look at the tips and troubleshooting, and then you'll just try it again the next lesson, or move on to a different concept. Sometimes I had a group of kids once who hated, and it was not a surprise, choice, no choice. I actually kind of hate it too, so I was more than happy. I got a full-scale rebellion on choice, no choice about 3/4 of the way through the lesson. I said, so are we all clear that there are some no choice situations? Health, safety, and the law. And they were like, yeah, health, safety, and the law. And that was it. Moved on.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for asking. You are not alone in experiencing that. Truly.
I think we're going to put it on our website. You can't mess up Unstuck.
I think it's one of our researchers.
Do it however you think it needs to be done. So, and this is the other point that actually I want to make, is that because educators, and we're in an educational environment, we often tend to think we have to teach to mastery before we can move to the next concept. You do not need to teach to mastery. Just keep moving along. Like I said, if they hate it, or if it's not working for you, just move on. And it's a spiraling curriculum. We keep coming back to the same ideas over and over. It's one reason why we really want to encourage you to do the lightning rounds, because the lightning round is a big place where those concepts come back over and over again. In the near pods, you can even see even more. I just drummed in, like the feelings target never had a time where it didn't come back in some way, every lesson. And if you can just start to integrate those things over and over again, you'll be amazed at how, even though you skipped a concept, it's come back. That was a long answer. Sorry, Stephanie. Anything else? Well, you could think another minute, but I and Katie and all the other authors are just so grateful for the time you're taking to do this, in especially a hard, I mean, I really don't think you could have a tougher year to be trying this. And we know that, and we're here to support you in any way. And we're not going to gratuitously give you get out of jail free cards. They're always really sincere, but we will support you in any way you think you need it.
I really appreciate this. I will say that this has been, none of what I'm doing in Unstuck and On Target is completely new to me, but I had done it in a way that I didn't feel had purpose. You know, I would have one student I was doing big problem, little problem with, and another couple of students I might be doing goal, plan, why, do, check. But it's been really helpful for me, particularly in this chaotic year, to have a scope and sequence, which I've never had for teaching behavior before. And I think that alone, I mean, I'm doing, like the other lady said, I'm doing a terrible job of it. Like I keep thinking, like, I know 5 years from now, this will look way different, but that's true of everything I've tried as a teacher. But I feel like I have a plan and a direction, and that's just been incredibly helpful for me. So thank you guys.
So glad.
Me too.
And just remember, you're modeling for your students when you're struggling with the curriculum, throw it in there, right? Yeah. It's really hard to be flexible when you've seen something for the first time, right? And I just had this meeting and they said I can do it any way I want, but I don't even know. I don't have a plan B, right? And this feels really crappy, right? Well, my students always knew I was rated R for language. But, you know, so go ahead and you'll master these are all opportunities to just live your life out loud. And we're always better at something the third and fourth time we do it, right? All right. Well, thank you guys for spending some of your precious time with us. And we're here.